Hello everybody and welcome back. Hi everybody. I'm gonna do this a little bit differently. Welcome again. Welcome to the Pennsylvania Berwind. This is episode number 20, wait for it on screen here, 27? I think we're on 27. Episode number 27. Today, guys, we're gonna do some work on the waterfront. We're gonna complete the waterfront area, I think. I mean, as complete as I can get it. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to do sort of a bike trail, so that's what we're gonna do in today's episode. I found some pretty nice bike paths and walking paths a little while ago, I think during my live stream build, the Dry Brook and Esopus Valley, when I was working on one of those parks. So I was kind of holding on to them for a little bit, waiting for the right time to use them, and this just seems like a really great time to implement those assets, because the whole Allegheny Waterfront area is sort of like, it's changing, it's in flux at the moment. It's becoming a former industrial area, and it's becoming sort of gentrified, I guess. I don't really know if I want to use that term, but it's coming a little bit more hip. It's getting a second life, so to speak. And I kind of got this idea from a number of places, but they do this. This is sort of like a growing trend right now in this country, is taking these old industrial areas and railroad areas and converting them into rail trails and bike trails and parks and stuff like that, which in some cases is really great. In some cases, it's really not so great. It's a little ridiculous. I'm not going to get into the politics of it all here, but that's a conversation for another day, another video, maybe a live stream even. But anyway, I liked the idea of implementing that here, because right behind where the camera is right now, we've got this sort of still active dock system, and with a few boats and some shipping and stuff like that. Nothing really crazy. But what we're gonna put in to fill in the gap in between is another sort of abandoned area. So we had done an abandoned section of the dock a few episodes back. I can't remember what the episode number was at this point. But we had done that, and I wanted to continue that trend that maybe this area used to be like a big dock as well, and has been since converted into this park. And what we had seen in the previous build, in the previous episode, is that some of these buildings have been demolished, and the pier has been demolished and that sort of thing. So what are they demolishing it for? What are they going to do with it now that they're demolishing all that? Well, they're going to turn it into a park. So that's kind of my idea here. And some of the inspiration came from down in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Bridge Park. It used to be a major industrial area when I first moved to Brooklyn in New York City. And I was living down in Bay Ridge. I used to ride my bike up to the Brooklyn Bridge Park area, but at the time, now this is back in 2008, 2009, so almost 10 years ago, there was still a lot of railroad infrastructure in the road. And there still is some there, but there was a lot more. And they were in the process of knocking down all of these big buildings, all these huge warehouses, pulling up whatever rails were left, because they had been long disused, I think since like the early 90s, maybe even late 80s. So for a very long time, abandoned trackage. So not a big deal, rip it out, it's been paved over a whole bunch of times. I was sad to see it go. I do have some photos, I think, kicking around on an old hard drive that I had taken. I didn't really know the significance of the area at the time. I was probably, 21 years old, and I just moved to Brooklyn. There was a lot of stuff to take in, and taking photos of abandoned railroad infrastructure at the time was not high on my priority list. But I do have a few photos kicking around, I'm pretty sure. But the point of that story is that this is where that inspiration comes from. A lot of those warehouses, I think they were being used maybe for some truck traffic for a little while, just trying to get their last little use out of it, before it finally succumbed to this sort of, I keep trying to say gentrification, but I don't think that that's the right word. But now, at the time that I had finally left Brooklyn a year ago, the park is beautiful. It's amazing. They took all the old piers and docks and turned them into basketball courts and soccer fields, and beautiful bike lanes, a great place to go walk, bike ride, go for a run, play sports. I think they put in some swimming pools. It's a really fantastic place. So some of my mental inspiration kind of came from that. You can look it up on Google Maps. It's the Brooklyn Bridge Park. It's right underneath the Brooklyn Bridge, and to the south, heading south by maybe, I don't know, I want to say it's maybe a mile or two long, heading southbound along the Brooklyn shoreline. Very cool place. I also got a little bit of inspiration from Strict Toaster. He did a video recently on Bisquegelhausen's build, and Bisquegelhausen, if you don't know, is doing a City Skylines build. It's called Gramercy. It's sort of based off of New York City. Strict Toaster did a guest appearance on it, and he did sort of a waterfront thing. And I'm talking way ahead of myself because I'm not here yet, but he used some of these pier things, these pylons, these wood pylons, and I'll touch on it again when they finally pop up on screen, but I had that kind of in the back of my mind as well because he was pulling inspiration from New York as well, same area, yada, yada, yada. So anyway, I thought I would just mention that. That's where the idea came from. And I thought that this was a really great idea to add into the Allegheny area because it didn't require a whole ton of assets. And you'll see by the time, and I didn't realize this until I did the cinematics. So obviously I did the build and then I did the cinematics. And when I was shooting the cinematics, I noticed my frame rate is really beginning to hurt in this area. And we're not even done. And you could definitely tell in the cinematics, which is really upsetting. So I really have to think about what else I'm gonna do with this area and have to be really careful with it. But anyway, when I was building this area, I was thinking, all right, I can do some really cool scenery stuff. I could use these assets I've been holding on to for a little while. I could take some of these ideas that I got in my head and implement them into this area without totally killing too many of the asset count, frame rate, issues and stuff like that through here. So I think the effect is pretty good. In my opinion, it could probably be a lot more detailed. I really could, actually. I could go really crazy with the details through here, but just the fact that the frame rates were already beginning to dip for me, and I have a really good computer, and if they're beginning to dip for me, that's kind of a big red flag for me, since this is a route that I want to release to you guys. If I'm starting to have performance issues, then you guys are very likely to have performance issues. So anyway, I guess getting into what's going on the screen here, I'm doing some similar work to the last video, waterfront sort of stuff, putting down some grasses and some sort of like seaweedy things and bringing in some trees. I didn't go full on with the slime, the sludge, whatever it's called, the pond scum. It just didn't seem right in this sort of area, so I didn't use that. These rocks that I'm putting down here, I'm putting them down as sort of like a crash barrier. So instead of using guardrails, they, maybe the architects and the designers wanted to do something a little bit more stylized, something a little bit nicer. So then instead of putting a big metal guardrail, a rusty guardrail down, they used some of these really nice rocks, these boulders, to prevent cars from driving into the people that are on the sidewalk there or the bike path. And now in this area, I'm just adding a little bit of a picnic spot. I figured having it close to the parking lot would make the most sense because you're not gonna take all your picnic supplies, park, and then hike, a half a mile into down the trail or something like that. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to just have it sort of nearby. And again, using some of these stones as sort of like a crash barrier sort of thing. I mean, I guess in reality, if a car was going fast enough, that's not gonna really do too much, but whatever. This is an idealized version of reality. So in this area, I'm trying to use these 3D trees, the STRMM trees, which I really am in love with. I think that they're great. I'd love to see more, and I'd love to see a variety that is in English so I can read what the heck they're supposed to be. But that's just my little take on that, but I think that they're great. And I know I've been kind of mixing in these billboard trees with these 3D trees, and there's a lot of inconsistency in how I'm doing it, and believe me, it upsets me more than it upsets you, or just as much. Maybe there's people out there that are really annoyed by the fact that I'm doing that, but again, as I said in my last video, mixing up some of these assets and bringing too many new assets into this world is gonna be trouble. So now I needed to fill up across the street, and again, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, this is definitely an industrial area, but it's sort of a failing industrial area or an industrial area on decline. So I didn't want to put in too many active-looking buildings, so I figured, a couple more of these wharf-type buildings. There used to be a big seaport here, maybe. And I didn't want to go too crazy with it, so I just sort of populate it with a couple of like parked tractor trailers and some little details and stuff like that. Nothing really too crazy. And that reminds me, I wanted to address in one of the previous videos, some of you guys had mentioned that the river looks a little bit too narrow for the type of boats that are going in there, and also the bridge that's on the far end, currently behind camera, looks a little bit low for boats to go through. Yes, I mean, maybe the river is not that wide, and I could widen it. I did widen it a little tiny bit before I started recording this video. Yeah, sure. All right, I could probably go a little bit wider, but I honestly really just didn't want to have to put down another baseboard on the other side of this, so I was trying to avoid that. And I think it's just wide enough to kind of get the illusion that these boats could go in there. And then as for the bridge, that was sort of like the end of the line right here, this port. I didn't imagine any boats, maybe small boats, going beyond that, and that's about it. Certainly not the barges. But all right, that's out of the way. Now, so this is the area that I wanted to add a little bit more of like this sort of deconstruction zone. And I wanted to add this big cement mill thing here just because it's just a nice structure to have, and it looks kind of semi-abandoned. There's a lot of weathering on it. It's a really nice asset. And I certainly saw a lot of that down in Brooklyn. Maybe it was like a grain elevator even, I'm not sure, cement elevator, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It just makes a nice tall structure, breaks up the scenery a little tiny bit, and adds another level of this sort of abandonment that's going on here. So I wanted it to look a little bit grown in, so I added some trees and shrubs and grasses like clipped right into it. So maybe these construction vehicles and the whole, construction site that's going on behind it, maybe they haven't gotten to this structure yet. It's a bigger job to do, so they're taking their time with it. And here's those pylons I was talking about. So Strict had mentioned it in his video, and I'm gonna mention it here, and I'm not trying to steal any words or anything like that, but this is definitely a feature of the Brooklyn waterfront. There's these pylons right off of Brooklyn Bridge Park, and it is a very iconic spot. I have so many photographs that I took from this spot. When you're looking from Brooklyn, from this viewpoint, you can see the sunset right behind downtown Manhattan and right behind the World Trade Center. And at certain times of the year, the light kicks right off the top of the antenna on the Freedom Tower, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful location to watch the sunset. It's a really photographic spot. I've been there so many times, and I have some beautiful photos of the sun setting and the colors that you get from, summertime sunsets. Oh man, I miss Brooklyn. Sorry. Anyway, so that's sort of that little bit, that idea in my head there was to bring some of those pylons in there. And honestly, I didn't even know what they were called. I think I accidentally found them last episode, maybe when I was searching for like buoys or something like that, and they popped up. I think it's called mooring pylons or something like that. I don't know. If you pause the video, you'll get the QID number, and then you can go download it yourself. It should be on the download station. So now back to this area, filling it in a little tiny bit more with some more details, just trying to connect up some of the fences, move some of the grasses and shrubs around a little tiny bit, make it a little bit more grown in. I threw some piles of rubble in there. Again, just to kind of get that look that maybe it's still under construction. They knocked down a couple of old buildings, but the construction has since moved on to the other structures on the other area there. So now over here, just again, bringing in some trailers, doing some ground texturing. I really didn't have much of a flow. I don't know if that's the right term. With this area, it was kind of just like solely piecemealing it together, and each section that I built kind of gave me an idea for the adjacent sections. So I didn't go through and be like, okay, I'm gonna put all the ground texture down, and then I'm gonna put all the buildings down, and then I'm gonna put the parking lots down, and then I'm gonna put this down. And that's not necessarily the method that I use all the time, but sometimes that's sort of what happens. In this case, it ended up just happening organically. I'd do an area, and then as I'm building the area and detailing it, some other ideas would come to mind, and I'd be like, oh, I gotta jump across the street and go do that. And then while I'm doing that, maybe another idea pops into my head up the block, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go take care of that, and get the idea out while it's in my head. And then slowly they begin to emerge, these ideas emerge, and kind of get this sort of organic flow to it. I guess that's how I build. And I always go in with a plan, but it's not like, oh, I'm definitely gonna put all these buildings here and all these roads here and this and that. My plan is kind of a really loose plan, I guess you could say, where I know what I'm after and the look that I'm going for, and I know how to get started, but it's just gotta pop the cork and just let it flow. And at that point, things just start to evolve on their own, and I start to think of things, and I don't know, that's just my building style, and for me, it helps to keep myself sort of like isolated or within bounds. So for example, like that whole that area in the distance off to the right and in the back, I'm not concerning myself with that at all. I pick an area to focus on for an episode because that makes a cohesive episode, for one. But for two, it helps me stay focused on what the build is supposed to be and what assets I'm gonna need to use, and so on and so forth. So to put some constraints on myself really helps. And I've heard some of you guys mention to me that you have some trouble building because you either get distracted or you just don't go in with a plan or anything like that. Try to constrain yourself to just a little area. Like say you're gonna work on just, I don't know, 100 square feet area, and just build that and detail it. There's a lot of it's always tempting to try to cover as much area and detail it as possible because we all want to have a finished railroad that we can run our trains on. So there's always that pressure of like, oh, I want to get it done so I can run some trains, and let me just spread myself out and I'll do some over here and I'll do some way over here and then I'll do this. And you end up with a whole bunch of like not connected sort of pieces that are just all over the place. And then that can really hamper your ability to get anything actually done because you're not focused, you know? You gotta pick a focus and stick to it. So that's my little piece of advice there. At this point, now I'm starting to notice some of the frame drops and stuff like that, especially after I populated it with some test trains in a session. So I'm like, all right, this back area is just gonna be terraformed, and I'm gonna throw some trees on it, and that's gonna be that. I honestly don't know what my plan is gonna be for the right side of the frame right now on the other side of the tracks. Like I said, because the assets are kind of getting a little dense in there and I'm starting to see some frame rate drops and stuff like that, I want to keep it kind of light, but I don't want to not have like a detailed scene over there. I don't want to just like plop down a whole bunch of trees, even though I'm probably gonna end up filling a lot of it in with trees. I do want to have some scenes over there, so I don't know if you guys have any suggestions for that. Let me know in the comments so I can maybe get a little bit of an idea about what I'm doing. And I guess that leads me into this last little bit before we get into the cinematics here. So my plans, I guess, for the next few videos that you're gonna see, there may or may not be a video next week. It depends on what I can get done in the next few days. But going forward, my plan is episode number, so if this is 27, episode number 28 is gonna be that adjacent side of the tracks that's empty right now. 29 is gonna be detailing. And then episode 30 will hopefully be it. I should be a bunch of cinematics, and then that's that. And I'm also, as I said in my last video, doing a bunch of tutorial videos, and I have another project on the way. So that's that. This is the end of the video, so I hope you guys enjoyed it this time. If you haven't already, please subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, all those things that other YouTubers say. But that's gonna do it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.